Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Beyond Max Q. I'm happy to have everyone here today, and I have the privilege of introducing the founder of H2 Crypto, George Kushner. He's here today. Very cool story. So I will let him, of course, tell it, but I love everything about it, and I think you will too. So with that, George, will you please tell us a little bit about what you're building, what you founded, and what your story looks like?
Absolutely. And first off, thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate it and look forward to the session here this afternoon. The journey is quite interesting. I think when you look at a lot of entrepreneurs who build things or start things, it typically might come from an innovation standpoint. It might come from a pain point standpoint. It might come from they just want to build something to build. And our story is not incredibly unique. I think it begins going back to 2015, believe it or not. I've worked in financial services my whole career, and I was working for an asset manager in New York. And a colleague of mine came up to me and he said, "What do you think about Bitcoin?" And I'll be a gentleman for the sake of this show. And I told him I didn't think much about Bitcoin, but I was a little bit more graphic about it. And the reason I said that was I was a man working on Wall Street 20 odd years, knew everything about everything, and just totally dismissed it. And a few years later, I kept hearing more and more about not necessarily Bitcoin, but blockchain, distributed ledger technology, cryptocurrency. And I'm not a technologist at all. So I decided to jump down the rabbit hole and at least try and get a cursory understanding of what is blockchain technology. I felt it was a duty to myself, having been around markets for so long. And Molly, after pouring hundreds of hours into studying the subject matter, I had this aha moment and I said, this technology is literally going to change the world. And this takes us maybe to 2017, 2018-ish, plus or minus. And it was time for me to set up an account. I wanted to see how it worked, what was going on. And I opened up an account on this one exchange, immediately ran into problems, couldn't figure things out. And the only way I could get a hold of them was via email. And here we are in 2025, and guess what? Waiting my email to come back to me. It never came back. And right then and there, I did three quick pieces of research. I wanted to find out one, did I happen to pick a cruddy exchange, or are they all nothing more than basically do-it-yourself trading platforms? And I think for the men and women that are in crypto, they can kind of empathize with this. Well, most exchanges, all exchanges are nothing more than do-it-yourself trading platforms. If you can figure it out,
Sure.
great. If you can't, too bad. I then want to understand how many people even own crypto. What I found out back then has been fairly static, which is no one in the world owns crypto. We're talking maybe 5% of global populace, 400 or 500 million out of 8 billion people. Then I want to understand why. And that's when the lights really started flashing. And the why was every single piece of research we can get our hands on said the same thing, which is the main preventative to crypto's broad and widespread adoption is its sheer complexity. And right then and there, I had this idea and I said, look, for crypto to really take hold, there's got to be a trust factor, security factor. And those start with being able to get a hold of the custodian of your money, of your capital. And this nonsense that, you get ghosted and it's like this Hotel California, you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave, made zero sense to me. And so we decided to try and create an exchange that had a much more kind of TradFi feel when it came to client support and the 24/7, 365. And that's really where it begins and ends for us initially. From that, I think we've morphed into several iterations that really make our infrastructure incredibly innovative, incredibly unique. And it's again, it's all centered around client service.
That's a perfect quick snapshot. I love that in the beginning you said I think this is lame in nicer words, but I think that that's really interesting, and I do think it's important. Customer service is huge. People, money is scary, right? Any form of it, and I think people want to be able to get a hold of somebody when something's wrong and talk about it. I mean, that's there's a lot of scammers out there, and so I mean that's a big
I
one.
think that, when you think we just couldn't even imagine if banks or brokerage firms in the United States or anywhere in the world ghosted their clients in time of need, they would be shut down by the regulators like that.
Right.
And it's just kind of commonplace in cryptocurrency. And again, the research indicates on top of the complexity, not having access to the companies, the firms that hold your money, yeah, that's a little daunting, and it's a little bit of a leap of faith as well. And again, one of the other things about us we might touch on, but we're very unique in the fact that not only can you get a hold of us? But we actually have a third party, a United States chartered trust company that custodies all of our clients' assets. And I know after FTX, everybody's very freaked out, if you will, and talked about cold storage and having their own hardware device, and I agree with that. But one of the preventative measures we try and do is there's no employee, including myself, of H2 Crypto even has access to our client funds. It's sitting in a third-party U.S. Charter Trust Company account. So again, another little nuance.
Well, I'm ready for the movie about FTX. You know that that's coming, right? Like, played by somebody famous. There's going to be like something crazy there. I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about how people can use H2 crypto. Like, what does this look like? Kind of give me your sales pitch, so to speak.
Absolutely. So again, I think that we're really looking for a couple different, if you will, low-hanging baskets of fruit for client signups. I mean, ultimately, we want as many clients as we can get, but I think that our model is really built off a couple different sets. One is newbies, novices, neophytes, all the men and women around the world that want to get into crypto. They're afraid of it. They don't understand it. Their friend or cousin got ripped off and they need that helping hand. They just don't want to sign up and put their money on an exchange or a platform knowing they can't get a hold of anyone. And that makes a lot of sense. And again, the statistics say, there's 8 billion people in the world, 4 or 500 million own crypto. That means there's 7.5 billion that don't. I'm not saying all 7.5 billion will, but everybody is seeing the growth trajectory of the space to be into the many billions by the end of, the next decade, call it, even sooner than that. And that's really where our bread and butter has come from. I will tell you that although we aren't necessarily trying to compete with any of the major people out there, we don't need to steal their clients or take market share from them. We have seen a decent amount of clients come over into H2 Crypto because the reality is today, if you get ghosted in time of need, there's no real incentive to leave one exchange for another because, quote, they offer great client service. None of them offer, none of them emphasize it. They just don't really care about it. So people are slowly and surely starting to find out about us and they're coming over and they love this high level hand touch, being able to literally get a hold of a human being that kind of blows them away. And then the other part is we have started to see a decent amount of businesses, and we're seeing some B2B and B2B2C play. We're seeing a lot of businesses that are poking around thinking about having cryptocurrency on their balance sheet, similar to what MicroStrategy and a lot of other strategy now, a lot of other companies are doing. And then we're starting to see some clients that maybe they themselves might not have a hankering or need for crypto, but they have clients inquiring and they don't want to get into the quote the business of setting up an exchange and all the regulatory hurdles you have to go through. So
I appreciate that, George. I think one thing too that comes to mind, you're talking about how so many people don't own crypto. I know you're really passionate about education and explaining it, and I would love for you to kind of dig in a little bit on kind of your feelings around how we can educate on crypto and what that looks like.
so education, yeah, education is absolutely is paramount. And I think that anybody that is going to be getting in any type of investment vehicle or trading vehicle, that understanding what you're doing takes a lot of precedence. And so we have numerous KB articles on the website. We also are in the midst of revamping the website. We're going to have a lot of interesting, cool tools to help clients get much more comfortable with the product set. And we're doing anything and everything we can. When I first started getting into this, I did the usual. I signed up for every industry email to get my hands on. There's all kind of crypto and blockchain news outlets out there today. I met people all over LinkedIn. YouTube has got some great videos. I would tell people to be very, very careful who they're listening to. There's a lot of good information and not so much information. But even though education is, I think, again, very, very important for the community, the Web3 community to grow and build, at the same time, without talking both sides of my mouth, I will also say that education can be quasi overrated. And what I really mean by that is, and I use this example all the time, when I come across people and they find out what I do for a living, they're like, "Yeah, I'd love to get into it, but I just don't understand it. And, I try to learn, but I just don't understand it." And I said, "Okay, I get that. Education, understanding is important, like we just discussed." But I said, "Let me ask you a quick question." I said, "Do you have cash in your pocket?" Like, I don't really carry cash. I use credit card for everything. Ah, great. Okay. So when you go to Starbucks or wherever you're buying something and you swipe that credit card, Can you explain to me what happens on the back end and how your bank is connected to MasterCard or Visa or Amex? And can you explain the dynamics of interchange and how the money's being pulled and credit and deposit? And by the way, how did you get to this meeting today? Did you drive? Yeah, I did. Okay. Did you use a combustible engine or electric car engine? I use electric car actually. I have a Tesla. I was like, okay, great. Can you tell me about the mechanics of how that car works? And by the way, I see a mobile phone in your pocket. Can you tell me how that? So the reality is, most of us have no idea how any of the things in the world work. Then why do we do it? Because it's broad and mass adopted. And so we accept it. Well, Sally and Jane and Fred and Mike and Julie are using it, then it must be okay. And I think crypto, again, with a little bit of a educational bump, that's where we're going to go. As soon as the complexity of using it, the user experience is not easy at all. Until that starts to come down and the layperson understands it, then I think you're going to start to see mass adoption. Again, going back to my run-ins with this first exchange and not understanding it, I will concede I'm not the, Atlanta, Georgia Mensa Club chapter president. Fine. However, a part of my 3 decades on Wall Street was selling fixed income derivatives to central banks. So I'm pretty good with markets. I know how to set up a bank account, brokerage account, fund it, and hit buy. With crypto, I was totally lost. Has to have a more user-friendly experience.
No, that's really well said. And I actually want to ask you another question. We didn't. This isn't scripted, so for the audience, fair warning. I just think eh, you're going to market with something that maybe doesn't have the adoption that some products do, right? And as a founder, how do you start to tackle some of those hurdles? What has been your strategy to approach, marketing not just the product, but also marketing what, the whole like the whole world, the ecosystem itself, right? Web3.
The issue thing about Web3 community, for the most part, it's a relatively small community. I think with that being said, there are a lot of builders that take interest in other projects and want to see the proliferation, because ultimately, I think people want to see the proliferation of the entire Web3 community. And so we have feverishly tried to work and partner with other companies in Web3. We'll do rev share models to try and help drive revenue their way. We also try and cross pollinate clients with them by putting maybe their name or logo up on our website, saying they're one of our preferred partners. So this way, again, they will see clients that they normally would not have seen. But I will tell you, growing organically for the most part is what we've been trying to do. We're doing a little bit of some advertising, have in the past, but growing organically has been decent for us. It really has, and I think some word of mouth has gotten out there. The most interesting thing to me about Web3 that caught me really off guard coming from traditional finance is we launched and started going really in the worst timing in history, which kind of stems back a few springs ago when you had the collapse of Terra Luna, and then you had some other major collapses in crypto, and a few months later you had the collapse of FTX. And what I didn't realize was in the crypto world, when we go into these bear markets, or as the Web3 community calls them, crypto winters, people are gone. I mean, it is game over. And we found that out the hard way by trying to advertise and spend a lot of money. Didn't get any results whatsoever. But again, this was in the deep, dark doldrums of the crypto winter. I know coming from TradFi for traditional finance that typically when you have systemic shocks to markets and they go down, that the sophisticated investors would come in because they would much rather buy a dollar bill for 30, 40, 50 cents than buy it for $1 or $2 or what have you. And so in crypto, we don't really have that yet. We have what I would consider, I don't want to offend a lot of people, a relatively immature trading community. And I think that hearkening back to, the Warren Buffett-ism of be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy, that just falls on deaf ears here. So moving forward, I think this word of mouth, and again, these B2B and B2B2C plays have created a decent amount of traction for us.
Well said. I actually really love that Warren Buffett quote. I've heard it a few times, but I think it never in that context, especially with like the crypto winters, which I didn't know you called them that. So that's good to know too.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
what's the bull market then? Is it a summer? A crypto
Mooning,
summer? Mooning.
mooning,
Okay,
like
all right. It's
going
good
to
to
the
know all the
moon.
terms. Here's the education right here. Like these are the definitions going to the moon. All right, I've seen that.
Don't lose me anymore. That's the extent of my vocabulary.
All right, no, that's helpful. Okay, I also want to ask you, so you worked on Wall Street, you've had this crazy career. you're finding yourself as a founder. What are some of the toughest parts about building this business? Things that you feel like you don't want other people to have to go through, or maybe they have to go through, but you have tips for how to make it through it.
I think, unfortunately, the latter part of what you said is the most salient, but I will give it my best. I think that if I use myself as a litmus test, and I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I feel like, especially in the early days when you're starting out, you typically are barbelling two emotions: sheer euphoria and sheer panic. And it just depends on what time of the day you get those things. And there was a great show back 10, 15 years. I don't know if you ever saw it, called Silicon Valley, which chronicled the startup life in Silicon Valley for tech companies. And as I go back and, see some of the clips or whatever on YouTube, what have you, it blows me away how now that really resonates with what I'm doing. Back then, I couldn't really relate to it because I wasn't in tech, wasn't in the startup world. But I will tell you, I think that smarts has nothing to do, or very little to do, with your success in the space. I will say that having tenacity, doggedness, and a refusal to quit is paramount. Ladies and gentlemen, when I say that, you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's a gut check. It's a look at yourself in the mirror and question yourself as a human. It will drive every negative emotion that you could possibly feel, but you have to realize these are ephemeral, these are normal. Get back on that horse and keep going. I will tell you a very, very interesting statistic. I came across a TED Talk about a year ago, and there's a very famous venture capitalist named Bill Gross with Idea Labs. This gentleman gave about an 8 or 9 minute TED Talk where he and his team sat down, crunched numbers. They wanted to find out what was the single or key ingredient to make a startup successful. And they looked at things like team, timing, business model, vertical they were in, funding, all these different metrics. They put them in a blender. They looked at 200 different companies. 100, I think, were inside Idea Labs. The other 100 were outside. The number one criteria that determined a startup success, and this shocked me, was timing. So going back to whether they're VCs or startups themselves, ultimately, timing being critical. And it's not necessarily that will make or break, but that was the number one factor. And so, harkening back to us, our timing at launch was terrible. Thank goodness I can tell everybody in the Web3 community that's listening, there has been a dramatic shift in sentiment post the US presidential election in November of 2024. People have started coming back to the space, obviously now with the tariff war. That's driven all markets a little bit cool right now, but I can tell you the Web3 universe is back on, and for a while it was some really dark times.
I like that. And when you say timing, do you mean timing around product launches, right? When you say timing around like product launches for your company, or like product market fit or
Yeah,
adoption,
I think
or
all the above.
is that what
So
you mean when you say
again,
that?
it could be the macro environment, it could be what you're building, it could be, all different factors, but the timing of that product getting out there, that was the number one thing.
That's really interesting. I also feel like urgency, right? Can you move fast? And is it good enough? I think comes up a lot. A lot of times founders want to make things perfect, exactly perfect. And I think to your point about crypto too, like you don't have to know it exactly ins and outs. Like just do it. Get started. Like do something, right?
And going back to another quote, so this is interesting. Reid Hoffman, the creator of LinkedIn, his famous quote is, "If you look back in time and you're not incredibly embarrassed of version one of your product, then you waited too long." And I'm a perfectionist. I'm a tinkerer. Even now, I mean, I constantly want to do things, but there is some sense of urgency to the product. I will also tell you, I used to be foolish enough to think that if we weren't first to market, then it was too late. And that's not the case at all. As a matter of fact, the first can oftentimes fail. Everybody loves to use MySpace versus Facebook, and there's, a gazillion different. Think of how Google now has disintermediated, all the Yahoos of the world and Expedia way back then, all these different search engines. So that's not the death knell. And the other thing is, it also will provide uh, clarification whether there's a need for the product and market fit. And in life, there outside the utilities, there are very, very few monopolies in business. So having some competition is not the death knell whatsoever.
I like that. If you're not embarrassed by version one.
Hey,
That's good. That's good.
getting to market and competition, I'll tell you some interesting statistics real quick around crypto. In the United States alone, there are 5,000 banks. In the United States alone, there are 3,500 broker dealers. In the United States alone, there are 15,000 registered investment advisors. Yet globally, there may be 500 or 600 exchanges. So I think that the exchange model over time will look a lot like it does in the banking space, where you have niche players. Not all, JP Morgan is not the only bank in the United States, and Goldman Sachs and the only brokerage firm. So I think that the exchanges will have niche, will fit certain types of clientele, and that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to carve out a little subset.
No, that's well said. And for the sake of time, I'll wrap up. Although I think this could probably be a much larger conversation for a longer period of time. I would love to ask you what you're currently reading because you do so much research, and that's our favorite question to end with. But I also think it'd be really interesting to hear what you're reading right now.
So actually, and I'm terrible with names. I know authors, but I just finished reading, you mentioned the FTX movie. I just finished reading the book about him from one of my favorite authors, which is Michael Lewis. And yes, I cannot wait for that movie to come out. That will be an incredible one. And I also finished right after that a book called Tracers in the Dark. And Tracers in the Dark it's like a fine wine. It gets better and better as you keep reading it. And I didn't want to put it down, but I paced myself because I knew I'd blow through it very quickly. And it's really all about blockchain technology, but from the, I hate to say this, but the nefarious side is talking about the takedown of Silk Road. But those two are excellent books. And yes, you're right. I love reading and constantly try and stay ahead of the game and be educated.
Thank you. Is there anything that we didn't cover in the interview yet that you'd love to just throw out there for the audience or for the group?
I would just say if you have interest in what we're doing or want to learn more about H2 Crypto, you can go to our website, which is h2crypto.io. If you want to sign up for an account, you can do it at h2crypto.exchange. Currently, we are approved in about 38 of the 50 US states and 60 odd countries around the world. And as I mentioned, please feel free to actually contact me directly. I try and communicate with all of our clients, and I will do whatever I can to help get you up the curve and make you feel comfortable with the space.
That's great. You're going to return the emails, is what you're saying. It's
I
not
am.
going to take
Yep. It
seven
won't be a
years.
bot. It won't be a bot. It will be me.
That's actually you. It's not about, I love that. Dueling AI bots. Thank you so much for coming on and being on the podcast. I'll link everything in the description as usual so everyone can find all the different links that George mentioned. And please connect with him. He's in the MaxQ community. We want to create a really great space for people to network and chat and discuss all things business. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.